I found out my husband cheated exactly 3 months after our wedding day. 3 months of bliss, of believing I'd finally gotten that fairy tale ending. Turns out fairy tales don't end with happily ever afters. Mine sure didn't. Instead, I was slapped with the raw, sickening truth. My husband was sleeping with my cousin. My cousin, Grace. The same girl I'd grown up alongside, who was more like a sister than anything. We'd played dolls, shared secrets under blankets, giggled till we cried. But I guess she'd always had a way of taking what she wanted, even if it wasn't hers to take. Growing up, Grace was the golden child in the family. Straight as, dazzling smile charmed the pants off anyone she met. Apparently literally. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the cautious one. Always second best. Always in her shadow. It was a role I'd reluctantly accepted over the years. Then I met Liam. He was charming, funny, handsome in a soft, reassuring way. For the first time in my life, someone chose me first. Me. Not Grace. It felt intoxicating, like finally stepping into the spotlight I deserved. I fell hard and believed, foolishly in hindsight, that he did too. My grandparents had always been my rocks. Grandpa's wisdom, grandma's hugs. They were more parents than mine ever were. They loved Grace deeply too, but I always sensed they saw through her shiny exterior. They knew I was the reliable one, the granddaughter who'd show up no matter how tired or hurt I was. When Liam proposed, my grandparents were ecstatic. They set aside money to help us buy a home, our forever nest. They also saved for Grace's graduation, equally generous, equally proud. I never envied Grace's share. I thought naively our bond was deeper than jealousy. But there was tension I ignored. Little side glances between Grace and Liam at family gatherings, inside jokes I wasn't privy to. Grace's flirty teasing I brushed off as harmless banter. It wasn't until I saw the texts, the graphic, gut-wrenching texts, that I understood the truth. They'd played me together, laughing behind my back. The day I uncovered those messages, my world cracked open. I didn't confront them. Instead, shaking and numb, I drove straight to my grandparents' house. I collapsed into Grandma's lap and sobbed until my throat was raw. Grandpa sat quietly, his jaw set hard, rage blazing silently in his eyes. They knew then, someone was going to pay. You never really forget the first moment betrayal hits you. It's branded into your bones, permanent as a scar. For me, it happened in our living room, blinds closed, phone trembling in my hand. Those texts, raw, explicit, full of promises Liam had whispered to me just hours before. Seeing them repeated to Grace felt like a dagger plunged deep into my chest. Scrolling through their secret messages, nausea twisted in my gut. Each word dripped with deception, painting vivid scenes I couldn't erase from my mind. I read about stolen afternoons, clandestine meetings in places I knew intimately, our favorite cafe, the park bench where we'd kissed for the first time. But the part that burned the deepest wasn't their lust. It was their cruelty. The way they joked about me, the oblivious wife, clueless and trusting. Liam calling me predictable, Grace mocking my innocence. My love had been their punchline, and that humiliation settled deep within me, bitter and permanent. The betrayal didn't start recently. It stretched back further, creeping quietly into our past. Grace had introduced me to Liam, something I'd stupidly thanked her for countless times. Now I knew the sinister truth. She hadn't introduced me out of kindness but boredom. She wanted a game, a thrill, and I'd played right into her hands. In hindsight, the warning signs glared bright, impossible to ignore. The quiet arguments, the phone calls Liam took in hushed tones, the abrupt silences whenever I walked into the room. I'd brushed it all off as normal relationship quirks, not knowing I'd been steadily digging my own emotional grave. Liam's guilt had surfaced briefly only once on our wedding night. He'd suddenly grown distant, sitting alone on the balcony, whiskey in hand, staring into the darkness. When I asked what was wrong, he'd smiled hollowly and said it was nothing, just nerves. But his eyes, shadowed and haunted, said differently. Grace had hugged me tight at the reception, her voice sweet and cloying as she wished us happiness. I remember thinking her embrace felt strangely cold, detached. That night, she danced with Liam once, and I recall how perfectly their bodies moved together, like puzzle pieces locking into place. Even then, something deep in me had recognized the ugly truth. So, there I was months later, drowning in the realization of their betrayal, too hurt and humiliated to confront them directly. Instead, I confided in my grandparents, laying my devastation at their feet, raw and unfiltered. Grandpa nodded slowly, eyes narrowed, promising he'd make sure they felt exactly what I was feeling now. For weeks, I lived in a kind of suffocating limbo, forcing smiles at family gatherings while quietly piecing together my revenge. Every glance Grace threw at Liam felt like acid splashed on an open wound. Pretending nothing was wrong while fury simmered beneath my skin was the hardest act I'd ever played. Grace kept acting like my confidant, her casual lies sliding easily past her lips, unaware I now saw through every twisted word. It made my skin crawl, how seamlessly she juggled betrayal and friendship. Watching her smile at me, innocent and sweet, was like staring at a snake poised to strike. Meanwhile, Liam became increasingly distant, withdrawn. He'd jump when his phone buzzed, eyeing me nervously as if I'd suddenly grown dangerous. The cracks in his facade were widening fast, paranoia gnawing at his composure. Yet he never confessed. He clung stubbornly to his secrets, desperate to hold on to his carefully constructed lies. Grandma and Grandpa became my quiet allies, their house my sanctuary. They watched silently as my smiles grew brittle, my laughter strained. Grandpa whispered assurances over steaming cups of tea, promising justice in his calm, steady voice. Grandma squeezed my hand softly, her strength grounding me as everything else unraveled. One rainy afternoon, Grandpa revealed his plan. The money set aside for Grace's graduation, her precious future fund, would be redirected to me. A silent yet powerful gesture that would strike Grace right where it hurt most. Her vanity, her dreams. Grandpa's quiet anger was ruthless, calculated, yet strangely comforting. A part of me recoiled at the coldness of our revenge. Grace had betrayed me, yes, but stripping away her future felt extreme. Yet the memory of her laughter at my expense hardened my resolve. Maybe I wasn't as innocent as she thought. Maybe betrayal had turned me ruthless too. The next weeks were filled with anxious preparations. I contacted a divorce lawyer, gathering evidence meticulously, texts, photos, receipts. Every detail a sharpened blade aimed at Liam and Grace's carefully hidden truths. The process felt both empowering and devastating, my heart hardened yet still deeply wounded. Then one night, Liam reached for me in bed, whispering apologies for his coldness, begging forgiveness without naming his sin. His touch burned like ice. "Tell me what's wrong," he pleaded. I turned away, silence my response. He couldn't know that very soon his entire world would shatter, as mine already had. It all came crashing down at Grandma's birthday dinner. I'd planned every detail carefully, knowing Grace and Liam would never suspect the blow coming. My stomach churned as we gathered around the table, smiles tight, laughter brittle. The air felt thick, electric, waiting for the spark. Grace sat opposite me, radiant in a way that felt insulting. Liam hovered near her, sneaking glances as if I wouldn't notice. Every whispered comment between them stoked my anger higher. My heart thudded painfully, hands trembling beneath the tablecloth as I gathered my courage. Halfway through dessert, Grandpa cleared his throat loudly, silencing everyone. "We've made some important family decisions," he began gravely. Grandma held my hand under the table, squeezing hard enough to steady me. Liam frowned, sensing danger. Grace just looked curious, oblivious to the storm brewing. Grandpa's voice resonated clearly, cutting through the tense silence. "Grace, your graduation fund will now support someone who genuinely deserves it." His eyes locked meaningfully on mine. The confusion on Grace's face melted into disbelief, then anger. Her mask finally slipped, exposing ugly resentment. "What does that mean?" Grace snapped, her voice dangerously sharp. I smiled coldly, finding strength in her panic. Liam shifted uneasily, glancing between us. Grandpa placed a gentle but firm hand on my shoulder, his voice filled with quiet pride. "It means," he said, looking directly at Liam, "betrayal has consequences." Liam turned pale as my lawyer, seated quietly at the table, stood up. Calmly, she handed Liam the envelope, the divorce papers, detailed with every proof of their treachery. His face drained of color, eyes pleading desperately with me. But I refused to look away, savoring his panic, his helplessness, his humiliation. Grace lunged for the papers, furious and frantic, but Grandpa intervened with quiet authority. "This isn't yours anymore," he told her firmly, voice edged with cold disappointment. Grace shrank back, stunned, silent, the the weight of family judgment finally hitting her with full force. I stood slowly looking around the room. I had imagined this moment would feel triumphant, satisfying. But it just felt raw and hollow. My heart ached at what I'd lost. My marriage, my trust, even my innocence. Still, meeting Liam and Grace's eyes, I knew I'd done what had to be done, even if I wasn't proud of who I'd become in the process. The aftermath was uglier than I'd imagined. The days following that dinner blurred together in chaotic waves of anger, confusion, and grief. Family calls exploded my phone, harsh accusations from relatives I once trusted raining down like daggers. I'd disrupted the perfect image we'd all carefully constructed, and no one forgave that easily. Grace became a ghost overnight. Her once pristine reputation crumbled, whispers trailing behind her wherever she went. Watching her collapse filled me with twisted satisfaction, then guilt for feeling pleased at her destruction. She'd betrayed me, yes, but I'd never imagined I'd see her reduced to this hollow version of herself. Liam vacillated between groveling apologies and bitter rage. He bombarded my phone with frantic messages, begging for forgiveness one moment, accusing me of destroying him the next. Each desperate plea only deepened my disgust. The man I'd once loved was nothing more than a stranger now, pathetic in his exposed deception. My grandparents faced backlash too. Relatives called them unfair, harsh, cruel even. Yet they remained steadfast, standing by me unwaveringly. Grandpa's quiet strength and Grandma's fierce protectiveness anchored me in a sea of turmoil. But their sacrifice, their reputation damaged for defending me, weighed heavily on my conscience. My divorce proceedings dragged painfully, a messy battle that drained my energy and patience. Liam fought bitterly, desperate to cling to the fragments of his dignity. In court he stared at me with pleading eyes, begging silently for mercy I couldn't grant. Each legal meeting chipped away at my emotional strength, leaving me worn thin. Grace's parents confronted me, accusing me of selfishness, of destroying their daughter's future over a mere mistake. The bitter irony stung sharply. Grace's calculated betrayal brushed off as trivial. Their cold words echoed in my mind, making me question whether my revenge had gone too far, whether I'd become as cruel as the people who'd betrayed me. Friends took sides, friendships splintered by loyalties that ran deeper than I'd realized. Some stood by me fiercely, others drifted silently away. Loneliness crept into my bones, colder and deeper than I'd ever known. I was right, yes, but being right had never felt so utterly isolating. Late at night, alone in a bed too big for just me, I wept quietly for the life I'd lost, for the pain I'd inflicted, and the innocence I'd never reclaim. Revenge had felt necessary, even justified, but it hadn't healed me. Instead, I found myself trapped in the wreckage I'd helped create, realizing too late that betrayal destroys everything it touches, including those who seek justice. Months passed, but the wounds didn't fade, not completely. Instead, they became part of me, scars marking where trust and innocence had once been. My world had stabilized, but I still carried the heaviness of that night, the bitter satisfaction laced with regret. Revenge hadn't given me peace, it merely reshaped my pain. Grace left town quietly, slipping away like a shadow. Sometimes I wondered if she ever missed me, if she ever regretted her betrayal. The empty seat she left at family gatherings spoke volumes. Even in her absence she lingered, a phantom haunting the edges of our fractured family. Liam moved away too, beginning a new life far from the wreckage we'd left behind. Friends occasionally shared bits of news about him. A new city, a job, another woman. Each update stung, though I refused to admit it aloud. Deep down, I hoped his new life carried echoes of his mistakes, ghosts of our past. My grandparents remained my pillars, their love unwavering. Still, I felt a quiet sadness when I saw them, knowing their support for me had cost them dearly. They'd sacrificed a piece of themselves for justice, and guilt gnawed quietly at my heart for involving them, for allowing my pain to spill onto those I loved most. Time had given me perspective, enough distance to recognize my actions clearly. I'd wanted justice, craved the feeling of power after being humiliated and helpless. But in seeking revenge, I'd also lost something crucial. My ability to trust fully, to love without hesitation. That loss, I knew, was irreversible. Friends often told me I was brave, strong for fighting back. I nodded and smiled, but privately questioned their words. Was it brave to strike back, Or had it been easier to let anger dictate my actions? Perhaps true courage would have been confronting my pain openly instead of plotting revenge behind smiles and quiet assurances. Today, sitting quietly in my grandparents' garden sipping tea, I realize healing isn't linear. It isn't neat, tidy, or satisfying. It's messy, complicated, like me, like the choices I've made. I have no grand moral wisdom, only the quiet acknowledgement that I've survived, changed forever by betrayal and bitterness. I'll never say I regret what I did exactly, but sometimes, alone with my thoughts, I wonder how different my life might be if I'd chosen forgiveness instead of vengeance. The question will haunt me forever, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind, reminding me that revenge isn't just something you inflict, it's also something you carry.